Greetings and welcome back to Room 303 and our chats with Emily as we're calling our readings through the poetry of Emily Dickinson. We are using the Johnson edition. We turn now to poem 210, The Thought Beneath So Slight a Film, another little four-line offering. And as we said in our discussion of poem 209, that when we get to poem 1063, ashes denote that fire was. It's one of those great lines that suggest even though a poem is brief, it can still be powerful. And I'm going to argue that this is another amazing poem about poetry. We will find these nuggets in our study of the poetry of Emily Dickinson, especially those of us who are writers and poets. We cannot help but be impressed by the way in which Emily will sometimes kind of step out of her project to explain what she's doing in her project. Now, our assumptions are that you've been following our stuff at learnstrong.net. Down that left-hand side, again, Chats with Emily, our playlist. I'm hopeful that you already worked through our set of introductory comments. I'm really hopeful that you've already read through the preceding 209 poems. We just finished with poem 209, With Thee in the Desert. Now, in this poem, Emily is trying to, in some ways, disclose why her poetry is in fact so compelling, all right? The power of the indirect leading to ambiguity is actually, she's going to argue, her strength, okay? And that is to say, in this poem, the thing that many people hate about Emily's poetry is in fact the very thing that is her strength. I think I, early on in my introductory comments, said that one of the things that drove me, really compelled me to pick up the poetry of Emily Dickinson and study it so closely was the great theorist Harold Bloom saying how frightened he was of Emily and her poetry because it is so ambiguous. It's so hard to figure out exactly what it is that she's saying. And again, that's why we call them Chats with Emily. We're only chatting here. We could be completely wrong every time, and that's okay too. I think Emily somewhere is smiling though as we hit poem 210. Let's enjoy it. The thought beneath so slight a film is more distinctly seen, as laces just reveal the surge, or mists the Apennines. Now, I find this remarkable. In the previous poem, 209, we were messing around with tamarind wood, and of course an African reference or an Asian reference to a tree. And of course here, we're going to be referencing that famous mountain range in Italy of the Apennines. Now, let's begin, first of all, with her observation. She doesn't call it a poem. She calls it a thought. And I love this about Emily, that she somehow understood that the lines that she was writing were something more than just poetic lines. I think our study of Walt Whitman, when we did Talks with Walden, we did all of the poems of Leaves of Grass. We made similar observations. Whitman is not just writing poems. He's writing thoughts, and he uses the poetic line to render those thoughts. And I think Emily's playing the exact same game. Notice, she'll say, the thought beneath so slight a film, in other words, a distraction of a kind, is more distinctly seen. That is to say, the thought is better seen, understood, because it's concealed somehow in some kind of slight film difficulty. In other words, it isn't completely clear. In other words, she seems to be suggesting, no, my poetry is intentionally ambiguous. That's the whole point. It requires that to get to the thought, you have to think. I'm not going to serve it up so easy. And then she goes to a remarkable simile with the word as. And she goes anatomical. Now, in some ways, we've kind of already played this game with Emily before, where she will begin to talk a little bit, and you'll remember her referencing, for example, to bodice in earlier poems and that kind of thing. Here we're going to play a similar game. As laces just reveal the surge. Now, of course, here, laces, that which covers the breast, the chest area. As laces reveal the surge. In other words, the heaving of the breast. And in this regards, I love that she uses the word reveal, because that's really the point of this poem. That's her key word. As I said many times, these poems often hinge on a single word. Here it's reveal. By the way, surge gets used only one time in all of her poetry, and it's here. In other words, you can look at a woman's chest completely bare naked, but that's nowhere as compelling as it being partially, lightly covered by lace, and you can just make out that the breast, the chest is heaving because something exciting is happening, right? Or, if that's not good enough for you, how about this amazing mountain chain, which, by the way, Emily never saw, the Apennines, and the mist that can often cover it. And, of course, for those of us who live out here where we have mountains, we're altogether familiar with the way in which sometimes partial covering of a mountaintop is going to make that mountaintop seem even more remarkable. Think about, for example, in our study of outside of Athens, the Mount Olympus that is often covered with clouds and the like. By the way, Apennine we will see when we hit poem 534. It will be her other reference to this mountain chain. Again, she just throws this in without much real explanation, assuming that we kind of know what we're talking about when we work with Apennines. Now, what exactly is this poem saying? I think that sometimes she's making the argument that sometimes obscurity actually makes these thoughts, these poems, more, not less clear. That in fact it is, and I can see some of you smiling because this is the essence of Emily's stuff, right? I mean, she plays games with us where you go, wait a minute, I got to do that one again. I gotta hear that, I got to read that one again. Notice how, if you've been reading up through poem now 210, notice how you find yourself, long after your reading of the poem, going back to think about the poem. This is the compelling power of the way she loves to disclose her thoughts to us. At 2b, well, the simile of breasts and mountains, obviously she's playing around with all kinds of provocative images here. I love the key words of reveal and surge, and that surge only gets used one time. Now, when we get to poem 1129, and I've kind of put off too much referencing to this poem because it is, well, one of the most anthologized of her poems. When we get to poem 1129, we're going to play this game in spades. She says it this way: tell all the truth, but tell it slant. Success in circuit lies. Too bright for our infirm delight, the truth's superb surprise. As lightning to the children eased with explanation kind, the truth must dazzle gradually, or every man be blind. Well, I think that's right, and I think that's, obviously you can think about, Emily studied the paradoxes of the parables of Christ, those come to mind. Think about how her study of Plato and the ways in which Plato's arguments from analogy often will play this game of it isn't abundantly clear exactly what he's saying right away. The power of Republic 7 and the cave allegory, we've given full lectures at learnstrong.net, are that it isn't completely clear to Glaucon what it is that Socrates is arguing as he begins to tell the story of people chained in a cave and all of that. Of course, revelation is the heart of that, just like the word reveal in this poem. Finally, at 3b, a question, especially for those of us who have been really kind of now methodically working through the first couple of hundred of these poems. Do you agree that the power of Emily's poetry is actually in the mists of the Apennines? Do you buy that? Does that work for you? And the lace that hides, if you will, the raising and the lowering of the chest, is that for you why Emily's poetry works? Or are you becoming increasingly okay with that idea? I hope so. Thank you.